Romiley is a village located in the northwest of England. It sits 4 miles from Stockport and 10 from Manchester. The village has a very diverse history, starting off as a collection of rural hamlets. The completion of the Peak Forest Canal at the turn of the 19th century brought larger-scale industry to the area. The village experienced a second wave of industrialisation when Romiley Station was built on the Manchester to Sheffield line, with the village being connected to 2 major industrial cities. Companies such as Robinson's Hat Works took advantage of the space of Romiley that could not be found in the industrial cities, and the village was soon teeming with factories. This reached a peak just prior to the First World War. However, throughout the 20th century, with the effects of industrial decay, the village lost many of its key industries, but it is experiencing a renaissance of late. Throughout it all, Romiley maintained a strong drinking culture, and I feel that a history of some of these pubs gives a clear picture of the village's history. The Spread Eagle. This is the oldest pub in the area. The date stone on the building indicates the origins of the public house straight back to 1722. The initials THG on the stone possibly alluding to the Gaskell family who owned the alehouse until the early 1800s. It was an inn that served the rural community and acted as a coaching house. In 1907, after the pub was bought by the Lees Brewery, its licence was turned down due to the dirty and tumble-down state of the pub. It was granted the licence the very next year. My family have a long history with this pub. My great-great-great-grandfather Samuel Watson served as a landlord at the start of the 20th century until the 1920s. The pub had lost a lot of business, but in recent years has seen a new lease of life when bought by the Allman family pubs chain. They repainted the classic white exterior and it's been reborn as a very decent carvery. The Duke of York. Originally opened as the King's Head in 1786, its first purpose was that of a coaching inn, which was built with stables and accommodation for travellers. Romiley at the time was still a collection of rural hamlets that were loosely connected. Following the death of Queen Victoria's uncle, the pub was renamed the Duke of York in his honour. While it looks considerably different to this photo, taken around the turn of the 20th century, one key aspect that remains is the arch. The stables are unfortunately no more. While built as a coaching inn for a rural community, it was well placed to serve the quickly industrialising village. It was located next to the large Davies and Metcalfe factory and was close to the numerous smaller factories on Green Lane. The Stock Dove. While also opened in 1786, the Stock Dove served a different part of Romiley. It opened as the Stock Dove Hotel, and it had stables and a full-size bowling green and served the rural communities around Romiley. The building also connected to a shop and a small house. It survived for centuries despite being away from the industrial heart of Romiley and served the more rural aspects of Romiley throughout much of its life. It received a new lease of life with the construction of vast housing projects around the turn of the century, delivering the Stock Dove new customers. In the 1980s, the pub rebranded as Magnums in order to attract a younger crowd through updated decor, live music, and more emphasis on moving towards a wine bar rather than a pub. It reverted to the Stock Dove by the 90s and underwent a refurbishment at the turn of the millennium. The Boats House Inn. I was unable to find out very much about this establishment, as few to none who are alive ever knew it as a pub, only knowing it as a house, which is no longer standing. I can only assume that it was opened in the early 19th century, as this was when the Peak Forest Canal was completed. It was located on the edge of the canal towpath. The only information I can find is that in 1848 the landlady was Martha Swindles, and the pub had regular business from a boat service which would travel up the canal to Ashton, twice a day in winter and 4 times a day in summer. The picture was taken in the very early 1900s and shows an incredibly busy scene. We don't have any information as to when this pub closed. The Cow and Calf. There is evidence that this pub existed as early as 1815, with reference being made in the Brebury Church Rates book to Peter Aldcroft being a tenant and the widow Hudson being the owner of the Cow and Calf. In 1825 it was run by Benjamin Brown, as reported in that year's edition of Alehouse Recognizances. It served many small industries in and around the Berrycroft region, which included a number of small mine shafts. It was taken over by the Robinson's Brewery around the turn of the century and served the growing factories nearby. The pub fell on hard times in recent years, frequently changing hands. It shut its doors a couple of years ago and is slated to be turned into flats. The Foresters Arms. This is another pub that is hard to pinpoint the date that it was opened. It was mentioned in an 1835 directory. It didn't appear in the 1828 version of the same directory. However, many pubs that we know for certain were open at the time are not mentioned, so this is unreliable. It was run by John Huff in 1835. The pub is commonly known as the Piggy, due to several pigsties being located to the rear of the pub at one time. The hamlet of Grieve had a strong and independent drinking culture. In 1906, records for Grieve Fold, a smallish street of around 20 houses, showed 4 alcohol licences, one of which being the Piggy. By 1924, only 2 remained. The Stag and Pheasant. Industry has existed in the region around Otterspool since 1616, with records alluding to a corn mill. The pub itself opened as a beer house in 1832. A beer house licence only allowed an establishment to sell ale, porter and beer, not the full range of wines and spirits. It served an important road to Marple and served many ramblers and country walkers. It ceased to operate as a beer house in the 1920s and is now a private house. The picture was taken in 1900 and Phoebe Smith was the licensee, and you can see her holding a jug in the entranceway. The Friendship. With industry growing in Romiley in the 1830s and 1840s, several pubs were opened, such as the Grey Horse and the Friendship. The Friendship started out as a series of cottages built in 1806. What is clear from the structure of the pub is that at least 2 cottages were used for the pub. The Friendship opened its doors in 1840 with James Swindles as the beer retailer. He ran the pub until his death in 1878, at which time his widow, Mary, took over until her death in 1893. The pub opened a bowling green in 1872, which has been in continuous use except when it was required as a vegetable garden during the wars. The pub itself was fortunate to have an almost captive customer base. The Jackson brothers opened a brick kiln in the land behind the Friendship and built Foundling Terrace to house their workers behind the pub as well. The Romiley Arms. With the construction of Romiley Station in the 1860s, a couple of pubs, the Romiley Arms and the Railway, were built in order to pounce on incoming trade to the area in 1862. In order to lure customers away from the railway, and with more space available to it, the Arms built an extension for billiard tables and also added a bowling green to the rear. The pub has always been a trouble hotspot. Older residents of Romiley remember the pub as a meeting spot where groups from neighbouring villages would congregate in order to have fights on Saturday nights. The pub also has a poor reputation in recent years due to fights and injuries occurring outside the pub, but it remains a popular location to drink. The Liberal Club. Built at the height of Romiley's industrial boom in 1913, this large establishment held weekly dances, dinners, functions and meetings of all kinds in its public hall. Prior to the opening of a cinema in Romiley, the Liberal Club used to show films as well. While the club is still in use, it's primarily used for its function room. The Winds and the Cherry Tree. Both of these pubs share a very similar story. With housing estates being built throughout Romiley in the 1950s, these pubs were built to serve housing estates. Both pubs also had a less than desirable reputation, with the Cherry Tree famous for its topless barmaids on a Friday in the 1970s. Both pubs shut in the early 2000s, with both being demolished and replaced with housing. Jake's Ale House. With many pubs shutting in Romiley throughout the 20th century due to industrial decay and as a result losing their customer base, and throughout the 21st century due to a variety of factors including the smoking ban, this establishment shows that the drinking attitude in Romiley has come full circle. Reminiscent of an old front room style bar, this micro pub offers a wide variety of independent drinks. It is also a model of success that can be used as an example in the world of ever reducing pub numbers, with it being able to open up another establishment in nearby G Cross. Thank you for watching. I hope you've learnt more about the pubs of Romiley and as a result more about the history of the village itself.